Hello, and welcome back to Literacy Matters Empowered Conversations. I'm your host, Dr. Cheryl Lundy Swift. In our previous episode, I had the privilege to speak with Cass and Cornelius Minor about equity as a daily practice. It's something that lives in our instructional decisions, our language, and in the ways we respond to students in real time. Well, today we're continuing that conversation with someone who brings those ideas to life every day in her school community. Joining us is Cristina Gonzalez, principal of PS 94 in District 15 in Brooklyn, New York. Cristina has worked closely with Cass and Cornelius and is deeply committed to building classrooms where belonging, rigorous thinking, and strong literacy instruction work together to support every student. Cristina, I want to welcome you to Literacy Matters.
Good. Cheryl, thank you for having me here today.
Oh, I'm super excited about this conversation and all that you're doing, not just for PS94, but the Sunset Park community. You're doing some incredible things there. And I always like to start with a question that helps our listeners to get to know our guest as people first, right? So, would you mind telling us three things that everyone should know about you and the work that you do and what drives you as a school leader?
Okay, so when I was thinking about the three words that define me and my identity, I'm just gonna share three behaviors or attitudes I have towards life. The first one is that I feel I am dependable. I show up. I show up for you or for anybody that I know I am in a position of support and help. The other thing is that I consider myself a student. I am a professional student, which I shared with my mother when I was growing up, and my mom said, eventually you have to make an income. And we laughed it out, but I am a professional student, which is different than a lifelong learner. Lifelong learners have this adaptability to the experiences that come to them, and they become better at it. A professional student is a lifelong learner with intention. So I realized that there are things that I don't know that it will make me better and the response to the world better by studying it. So I consider myself a professional student forever. And the last thing you need to know about me is that I am direct. I will not bore you with confusion. I respect humans too much to wait for an intricate explanation of things. I will tell you straight so that you and I can move forward.
Wow. I appreciate that. And I know our listeners are going to absolutely appreciate those three things. Well, I appreciate you showing up for our viewers and our listeners for Literacy Matters today. So let's get into it. So in my conversation with Cass and Cornelius, which again, that conversation just blew me away, they emphasized that equity is not a program, that it's not an initiative, that it lives in everyday instructional decisions that we make. So, from your perspective as a principal, what does that actually look like in practice at PS 94?
So equity for us is what governs our work and our belief. And equity has many, many meanings. But in a school community like mine, equity is decisions that we make around students and how do we center it to provide access. And when I speak to access, I speak about the entire child and their families. It's about getting to know, to provide. It's about getting to know, to serve. It's about understanding that not all access or planning of provision for students are the same for all students, even when it means the same learning task. When I think about equity in terms of capacity building, and when I speak about capacity building, I talk about three stakeholders: the students, the teachers, and the parents. when I think about that, it's about the questions that we ask ourselves before we're about to make a decision. And if you want to ask me about accessing what, right? So it's access to learning, but joyful learning. It's access to content, but relevant content. And it's access to minimizing stressors. So it's addressing the insecurities that my community encounter. And one of the biggest parts of 94 is that we recognize individuality. So for us to guarantee equity, we know that there are different tiers of presenting a learning task, but we really focus on tier 2, which is small group instruction. And we expect that we accomplish mastery through small group instruction as we get to know our families and we pair our knowledge of the family with our ability to provide services through learning.
So, I think you're incredibly powerful, and I've been reading about all that you do in your school and in your school community, the Sunset Park community. And I know you get it, right? And I know, as a powerful leader, you get it, you do it, you show up, you are the work. But how do you help your teachers, right, do that? Maybe they're not yet a professional student, right? How do you help them provide this kind of access? How do you do that?
There's a lot. Well, teachers, to be a teacher, the teacher that is a teacher by calling, requires that reflective piece of understanding that you cannot reach a student until you actually know the student. So PS94 teachers are phenomenal in the sense that they know that the work goes beyond unpacking a curriculum or beyond writing a lesson plan. For teachers at 94, the idea is that we communicate the why we're doing it. Why? And why do we want to teach this skill? Why do I need you to list the things that you like the most to then go into a writing piece? Why is it important that we differentiate even the materials that the children use? Why? So for the teachers at 94, it's a constant conversation of why, balancing high expectations and where we recognize there are barriers in the learning of the individuals that we serve.
I love that because when we think about these barriers, right? How do teachers notice those small moments that either kind of give that open access that I know Cass and Cornelius talked about, or unintentionally create barriers? How do we help teachers notice that? Because I know they're reflective, and I love the idea of why. To me, when I think about why I do this work when I get tired, it fuels me, right? It reminds me, and I always make sure that I think about it in terms of, again, students and families that I support. But how do you help teachers notice those things that they do to either, again, open access or unintentionally create barriers?
We do a lot of learning together. I have worked with the Minor Collective for years. We began by unpacking Cornelius' book, We Got This. And then we also moved on. We worked with Dr. Goldie Mohammed, and we created addendums with her in all of our social studies tasks. So that we would be inclusive. But the truth is that the work has to be done in collaboration. So Cass spoke in your episode about this activity that she does when she makes us describe a student. And then she turns it into a positive, right? We have done all this work with our staff. We make connections constantly towards the positive. I believe that language changes attitudes in the brain. And it's really a lot about building capacity, centering around themselves and where the students are and the students that they serve. And this is a never ending work. We will never be done. This is what I tell my teachers. You will never find the final formula, because you can find the final formula for Cristina, but next year that formula is obsolete when it comes to Samantha, you know? So it is a constant building capacity and understanding to bring back to relevancy what is systemically neglected. And in that, we have to recognize things like food insecurity, employment insecurity, what's going on in the world that affects our community, the cultural background of the children that we serve, all of that come into play into the discussions and reflections when we are planning what we're going to do to bring these children to success when it as understood by the educational field.
Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful. My wondering though, I would imagine that our listeners are like, well, wow, how do they do it? How do they have the time to keep doing all of this learning? And with all that's on teachers' plates and all that's on your plate as a principal, and with, I would say, a high need population of students and families, how do you find the time and the energy to do it?
So we have a very supportive model of in this school. First of all, everybody that is out of the classroom have been a classroom teacher. And by that, I mean my coaches and my assistant principals and myself.
Mhm.
We are constantly studying and really, so we pilot the things that we're going to make into policy of 94 are piloted granularly before we actually bring it at scale. That's one thing that benefits us. The other thing is that within the week, we have inserted periods of collaboration. So we have within the week professional weekly spaces in which we devote ourselves for learning. Nothing is learned by the teacher that hasn't been learned by me. So once and this is a philosophy of mine. If I'm going to ask a school aide to move a box, I will move the box before. I need to know how much it weighs, So it's that model that before I ask you to walk it, I have walked it myself so that I can prepare the supports for you. And I reflect the students of 94. I am dual language. I'm an English language learner. I am an immigrant. So it's all of that together. And so is the body of support that we have for our students. Our staff is just like that. So we have integrated spaces for teachers to learn and unpack together. We're a very unique school. We have experts. We have coaches in-house in ELA, math, and SEL that sit as part of my instructional leadership team. And these are the questions that we ask. We follow the philosophy or the learning from scholars like Ellie Drago, who wrote a book that said, "Talk to me so I can listen." And in that, we understand how we differentiate the work of learning to support, even with our staff, with our teachers. So our professional learning plan is designed to address the needs of the students, knowing where our teachers are. So all of that is taken into place, and I understand time. So we do things in a way that allows for teacher preparation before we actually bring it to the classroom. I don't believe in winging. I believe in preparation.
Yeah.
So that's how we do it. We have a model of support. And when I believe it's my true duty to support the students, but also support the teachers. And we have a wellness check. It's 2 questions. How's it going? And what can I do to make your life better? And that embodies all balance. So that's how we ensure that the teachers are getting what they need. And my staff is prepared to give my children what they need.
Wow. It sounds like to me that you're doing with your staff what Cass and Corn were talking about in terms of what we all need to do for students. And that's to make sure that everyone feels like they belong and their voice matters, right? So, what are some of the quiet ways you communicate to students that you belong here?
There's a lot of metacognition in that answer. I want you to know there's a lot of thinking about thinking.
Mm,
And here are the quiet ways we validate your contribution. And because I can say to you, we validate their participation, but many children don't explicitly tell you how they are responding to the learning. But you can see it, how they move around the classroom, how they interact with their peers, how they manifest in silence. They are very vocal, extroverted children, but I'm talking about those internal thinkers that are learning, but you won't see it the way that traditionally people would see it, which is raising their hand, interrupting, or wanting to show you the work. So the silent ways is the questions that we ask and the pause that that I expect my teachers to have when listening to a student with the intention of learning about them to then bring them to success. Those are quiet moments. By the way that we design the classroom. The classrooms have flexible seating and intentional seating, because there are tasks in which I want Cristina and Samantha, and I keep using Samantha. Samantha is my baby sister. So just so that people don't say I have preferential treatment on anybody in this podcast, I will be use my sister's name. My other
sure.
sister's name is Maria Elena. So it's how we really create learning experiences that are made for you, for
Yeah.
all of you, including respecting kids' preferential language choice to communicate. Even though we're a dual language and we have certain models and expectations, we do not hinder their ability to manifest their thoughts or concerns in the language that they choose at the moment. And then we'll redirect them depending on where we are or the goal of the language at that time. Another way that we silently support equity is by the books that we read, is by the people that we invite for career day, or the authors that we're going to study, by the activities that we select that we know we have learned that they're curious about or that they bring them joy. Those are the silent moments, by the materials that we provide. We have so silent moments. For example, our student council is very vocal, and they will bring us to the forefront of what they want to do. And my kids understand that they are makers and shakers of the decisions of the school. So it's not random that they would come to me. There was a particular year that my student council came to me and said, you need to come into a STEM lesson because the writing is not very democratic. That's all I needed to hear. Then I brought my student council and I brought my STEM team and I sat them and I said, we have to discuss learning experiences. So these are the ways that we elevate participation and contribution. They see themselves in the work,
Wow.
silently and loudly.
Wow. They see themselves in the work. That's powerful. That is really, really powerful.
It's
It
culturally responsive.
it is culturally
That's
responsive.
what it is.
It allows students, again, to feel like they belong, but also even that silent student maintains their dignity because I can still respond in a way that I'm able to respond or that I'm giving the space to not respond, right? And
And that is a response. That's
yes.
data.
Yeah.
That will inform you.
Ooh, I love that. The response is also the non-response, or the quiet time is a response. That is data. That's powerful. Wow. Cass and Corn talked about this maintaining dignity while still holding high expectations, and how do you think teachers can respond to students in a way that helps them to maintain that dignity. But again, you are still holding them to high expectations, right? I think the worst thing we can do to students is pity them and lower their expectations. We know that, you know, if you lower them, right, kids, I believe kids live up to the expectations that you set, high, low, medium, right? How do we help teachers maintain high expectations and dignity all at the same time?
So, by the way, differentiating instruction by lowering the expectation is just mediocrity. We don't allow it here. There's no space for that.
Oh, wait. Can you say that one more time?
Differentiating instruction by diluting, by lowering the task, and it's just mediocrity. There's no tolerance for that at 94. But I'm going to tell you why. So there's always the challenge of this child can't do this at this grade level, or this child will not be able to do the task. And in that, I have to tell you this. That is the wrong philosophy or attitude towards teaching and learning, because access is the key. So we bring you back to equity. And in that, there are two key points that I want people to consider. First of all, Cornelio always talks about the roadmap to success, which is universal design for learning. We have to look at where we want to take them, to then backtrack where they are, which is the zone of proximal development, and get them right.
Right.
And the way to do that is to allow teachers to understand of the power of not yet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We may not get to it on Monday, but if you understand the power of not yet and organize or orchestrate a succession of experiences that are grade level access by your differentiation, by Friday, we have arrived. So it's the power. We have to allow time and process. I value the process and the journey much more than the final presentation. And I'll give you an example. We are a PBL school. I consider 94 a language school that has experiential learning integrated. And one year I realized that we were too much in celebrating this end of year or end of unit projects, and very little credit had been given to the process. So I stopped going to the celebrations. I was just going through the moments of journey and challenge. Those were more valuable. And I put it as a policy, and it shifted the mind of everybody. But the key is that there's no need for lower expectations. Don't bring that to me. We will get there. What I want you to understand is that if we're not there yet, we're going to get them there by providing access. That's it.
Wow. I mean, that, I mean, I certainly have the same belief, but I have never heard it quite put the way that you did it. Just saying, again, differentiation with lowered expectations is just mediocrity. That's powerful. Wow. And when I think about that, I also think about labels. And I'm going to tell you the thing for me that like floored me in the conversation with Cass and Cornelius was when they talked about labeling a child without action, that it could be like a slur, right? It's harmful, right? So instead of labeling students again low or struggling, they really talk about challenging educators to focus on what students can do and what we will do next to grow their capacity. So this concept that you have of not yet, like that, those are my favorite words. I remember my little neighbor next door, Nolan. He was like maybe 3 going on 4, and he couldn't read, and he was, and his siblings could read, and he said, Miss Cheryl, I said, what's going on, Nolan? He goes, Miss Cheryl, I can't read. And I said, Nolan, you can't read yet. And he perked up and looked at me and said, do you know your alphabet? And he said, yes. Do you know some of your alphabet sounds? And I said, yes. Do you know some of your alphabet letters? And he said, yes. Do you know some of your alphabet sounds? And he said, yes. Do you know some of your alphabet letters? And he said, yes. Do you know some of your alphabet sounds? And he said, yes. Do you know some of your alphabet letters? And he said, yes. Do you know some of your alphabet sounds? And he said, yes. Yes. I said, well, you're going to learn some more. And then you'll be able to put those sounds together and read a word. And then you'll be reading a whole sentence. And that concept of like breaking it down, like you're going to be able to do this and you're going to be able to do that, gave him like a confidence just in the conversation. So I would love to know how you've helped your teachers shift from like labeling students, right, to being able to study them more to give them what they need, right? Because I know for me, sometimes we're even asked to give a label, right? So how do we move past the label and really get to know and value who our students are in front of us?
It's a belief, right? So like I'll bring you back, I will constantly bring you back to how the brain works. And it's all about language. Um at 94, I'm gonna share this. 94, I don't I so there is this term students with disability, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a term that we use at 94. And when I became a principal, that was my first year of trying to shift the mind of making people understand that the glass is always half full. And one thing that I did is that I said, when we're talking about students that have gone through a deeper process of understanding how they learn and being resulted in an IEP, I want people to rename them into students with other abilities. So at 94, we call the students with other abilities. And I'm going to tell you why. And it's not that I want to take away from important classifications that describe part of the context of the learning of an individual. It's not about that. I don't want to put anything down. It's part of the data and it's part of the information of the human. But this is what it does to my teachers. When I speak with them about an individual, and instead of saying a student with disability, they come to me with the phrase students with other ability. It forces us to think about planning learning experience with knowing what they can do. It shifts our conversation to empowering the child more so than repressing the child. And it has done wonderful. And we understand that for the rest of the nation, when we're talking about those students, to engage into collaboration with other people, we switch it to students with disability because they don't know how we really rename it and rebrand this whole thing. But that's one thing. The other thing that we do to take negative labels away is that, yes, we do talk about performance. And if a child score a 2, not that a child is a 2 or a 3 or a 4.
Right.
If a child score a 2 in a specific assessment, or in a screener, we know those informations, we take them into account. But when we're going to talk about the description of a human, we really focus and center our planning around skills and habits.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't allow us. And then we're very careful in how we refer to them. They're readers, they're writers, they're scholars, they are geologists. They are athletes. So it's all about picking the right word for our brain to click on it and have a different attitude towards the challenges that we have as pedagogues. That's it. And it does work because you have to see how we sit and discuss how to make somebody successful that has have a plethora of challenges and may not be ready for a task as it comes without any differentiation. It does work.
It absolutely does work. I was in a store recently and it's almost like a warehouse of a store and was looking for a particular piece for a shelf. And I go up to this man, and he's walking me around, and he's saying, "Oh, it's going to be on a whatever." And this man we kept getting interrupted on our walk there. And he would say, "Oh, it's on this aisle." And he would tell them the aisle letter, aisle number, what side of the aisle it was on, whether it was on the top, middle, bottom shelf, wherever it was. And that happened at least 5 times on our way to him showing me where I had to go. And I said to him, "Man, you have an incredible memory." Oh, and he said very proudly to me, "Oh, that's because I'm dyslexic." And I like it stopped me in my tracks, and I said, "Yeah, that's your superpower, absolutely." Because someone has taught him that he can remember a lot, and had to remember a lot due to him just being dyslexic. And that's it. And it was really it was enriching. So I appreciate that. I love the shift in thinking. I you know to really you're looking at it from an asset based perspective, and
Yes.
but from a human level, right? That you are, you are a scholar, you are an athlete, you are a reader, you're a writer. And I was just at the Plain Talk conference, and someone was saying they stopped telling, actually it was Justin, I believe, who said, um you know I stopped saying good readers do this, because it was making kids who aren't quite yet there, right, feel like, "Oh, well, then I'm just not a good reader." And instead, readers do this, right? So that now I can connect. So I love that. I love that so much. Um, so when we think about our children, like, one of the things that I love the most about children is I learn so much from them, right? I say sometimes that some of my students are my best teachers. They have rich ideas and really strong thinking. And one of the things that would break my heart as an ELA teacher is that they had all these rich ideas and this strong thinking, but they sometimes struggle to express those ideas because they may have had difficulty with handwriting. And that handwriting could have come from, maybe I don't have good fine motor strength. Maybe I've never been explicitly taught how to form that letter correctly. Maybe I don't know the letter at all. It could be that I don't know how to write a strong sentence. I don't know what a complete thought is, right? Or how to share a complete thought on paper. How do you support your teachers in honoring students' thinking while you're still helping them grow as writers?
Okay, so that we have this idea that we're going to label students writing by their final piece. And I'm going to bring you back into the journey, thinking about writing. There's got to be time for thinking, right? And is it's language in the brain. So let's talk about English language learners for a little bit. And because if we expect them to write in English and English is not the first language, that doesn't mean that they don't have the thoughts, right? So it's a little bit more of an uphill battle to manifest it because of vocabulary development and language acquisition, where they are within the language acquisition spectrum. But it is about thinking. So what do we do to allow them to manifest, right? We are very big. 94 is very big in theater. And it's because theater allows them, is a very non-judgmental, low risk environment to try to manifest your thoughts. So writing is part of one of the four modalities of language, right? But what comes before writing? Oracy. So is the by saying it, we're really practicing what we're writing. So when we try to evaluate where they are in writing, can they write a word, or can they come up with a full sentence or a complex sentence? we need to think about how they are at manifesting this verbally, because oracy is the rehearsal to write. So what we do is that we integrate a lot of conversation and manifestation of their ideas before we put them into writing. And technology helps, I want to tell you, because we can now speak to an iPad and the iPad will help us write. Or we can use certain devices to help us write and have this idea of a guiding technology for purpose. But also, again, I'm going to bring you back to the power of not yet. We have models of support and we know where we're taking them. And with time, they'll be able to express it. If there is no other challenge, like perhaps a speech impediment or any other services that they need to do to develop the writing skills that they need. We're very big on print writing, because we now do a lot of computer-based testing and things like that. So we're shifting a little bit our expectations of writing on paper, because it does writing and the friction and the movement makes a pathway in the brain of how to make it more sustainable. It works better for working memory.
Yes.
So I'm trying to answer the question without going off on a tangent, because that's typical me. But it's all about thoughts, thinking, developing the vocabulary that's necessary to then manifest it and with patience put it in writing. We do have the traditional supports, which are sentence starters, personal word walls, word words in the classroom. We are very intentional in our phonics program. So we know the writing vocabulary and the combinations of letters that they're working on to create words that make sense and
Sure.
can describe their thinking. So that's part of a, staircase of complexity that we know, but we also do a lot of work in individual in creating what they want. Because if I have a child that loves dinosaurs, they will be more prompt to write if I tell them write me about a how-to book about how dinosaurs walk or find food. So it's all about also individual interest and curiosity. That it's a key to the success of writing. And heterogeneous grouping. We learn from others. So when we're for example, I just had a meeting recently in a ICT third grade, and they were talking about groups, and there was this tempting idea to group them by where they were in the skill, in a specific skill, and I said it's a writing process. So we're going to talk about introduction. Let's work with all the children that are working on their introduction, regardless of where they are in the language acquisition process.
Sure.
Or in the handwriting process, if they can actually form the letter, or in the conventional process, if one knows the capitalization rules or the punctuation rules or not. If we bring a diversity, they will learn by collaboration. So it's also about the strategic and intentional grouping that we do with our friends and our teachers and our students.
So I love that. I was following in all of those modalities to really support children, and I love that you talked about oracy. That's, if there was a theme for the sessions that I attended at Plain Talk, it was that it all starts with the foundation of oral language. Period. Full stop. How do we help our children develop oral language skills?
We have to create risk-free environments so they can try and take risks. We also have to provide content and culturally relevant learning experience. We're very explicit in the instruction and unpacking of the English language through phonics and our ELA blocks, but they have to be integrated with richness in content so that meaning becomes the north. And when they get to say, I get it, I get how the condensation cycle works. You're giving them the power to be able to to write about it. That makes sense.
Sure.
And it's really all on integrating content into the writing
Yes. Yes.
and
Wow.
giving them the opportunities to talk about it. So before we are going to give you a piece of paper, we have to have created experiences or school trips or conversation with families or experts about it. So you're developing this richness of vocabulary and connections in the brain.
Sure.
And then we bring you to the paper. So it makes total sense. You
Yeah.
know, it's much, much harder if I give you a piece of paper and say, write me about what
Yes.
you, right? So it's all about how we understand what comes first when it comes to writing.
I love that. And I also love your connections to the science of reading and the science of writing, because we do know that handwriting is also a part of that reading, writing brain, right? And that you even mentioned, the kind of the sensory piece of it, hearing that pencil hit that paper, the actual fluid motion, it does go back. It's all connected. So I appreciate your highlighting that as well. We've been talking a lot about students and equity, right? And how teachers can support them. But we know, teachers are human too, right? And when we think about sustaining strong instructional practice, whether it's in reading or writing, no matter what it's in, um, they require support, right? They require some time to reflect. They require us going back and making sure they understand the why and be clear, right? As a principal, how do you create this wonderful culture that you've been describing, the conditions, if you will, for teachers to do ambitious, equity-centered literacy work without them getting bogged down, overwhelmed, and burnt out?
We bring them to their own personal journey all of the time.
Yeah.
It is all about empathy, and it's all about how were you treated when this was difficult for you? How would you have hoped that teacher would have addressed you at that time? We bring them to reality. Teachers are in locus parentis. That's a Latin term. We are the parents while we're here. So wouldn't you want the best for your own child?
Yes.
We bring them to that. But we're very patient and then not. There's this balance of sense of urgency because we have the challenge right before us. So we have to act. But I also am going to give you time to really internalize the purpose of you being there for that child.
Yeah.
So we bring them to their own personal stories all of the time. It actually starts with them. And that allows them to even understand biases or barriers that they may have. This is where we have honest conversations with ourselves about our own low expectations for ourselves as pedagogues. We
Yeah.
can do it. There's no limit to it, and we will hold your hand as we go. I also bring them the experts. I went to the University of Chicago to study public policy and education. And one thing that they allow us to do is that they allow us to cross over departments and faculty. So it's not common that if you are an ambitious student, you would go where the expert in statistics or somebody that won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. I bring them the best so that we learn together with them. That's why we had the minor collective. There was no other choice for me than to have Cornelio and Cassandra Minor or Dr. Goldie Mohammed when it was about culturally responsive classroom. And that is, I have to say, that's a practice of District 15. That's
It
not
is.
exclusive of 94. I bring them the people that have walked the walk and that are aligned with this idea of teaching with empathy and making sure that the experience are meaningful, rigorous, but also joyful. And
Right.
that's how we do it.
Well, I'm going to say this. I was a principal in District 15, and I know that for a fact because I was under the tutelage of Superintendent Anita Scott, and she did that wonderfully. I learned so much, and she did bring amazing experts to kind of help me sharpen my saw, right? And so my sword. So I really appreciate that, and have really loved what you are doing there again in Sunset Park, which is where some of my students came from as well. So I love what you're doing there.
I agree with you, Dr. Cheryl. Dr. Scott was instrumental in the support in District 15, but in that same token, I have to say that the current superintendent, Rafael Alvarez, understands the learning that it takes in principals, administrators, teachers, parents, and students, and he is as well very supportive of the work that we do at 94.
I am so excited that that Superintendent Raphael is continuing that amazing work. Now, as we close, I really, first of all, I'm just inspired by you. I have written so many things down that you have said that um, are just phenomenal. It makes me think about whenever I'm talking to someone, and it makes me think about myself as a teacher, myself as a student, myself as a leader, myself as a parent. Um, I'm going all over the place, and it really allows me to reflect as a learner, as a professional student, which I have adopted now that terminology. But I would love for you to really leave with some advice, some empowering advice that you might offer to our educators and our families who want to build a culture in their schools and classrooms where their children feel seen, feel capable, feel successful, um, in literacy, because that to me is freedom, it's power, right? When we have access to be able to read and write, to be able to speak and to be able to listen in a way that's going to make a difference for us. So what would you tell them that they could do or should do to build these classrooms and schools that are really equity based?
So I keep in mind one question from Cornelio Miner's book, We Got This. And I'm going to read it because it's in my board.
Okay.
Um, and how do I make it impossible for teachers to fail as a principal, right? But I have a post-it and I switch it, and it's how do I make it impossible for students to fail? How do I make it impossible for paraprofessionals, APs, coaches, and parents to fail? That is the job of a leader, of a principal. The work is only possible with empathy. You have to be willing to put yourself in somebody else's shoes with the purpose of solving the problems, not just to learn it and, oh, I know how it feels. No, you have the responsibility to write that roadmap to success together. For parents, for everybody else, we have to really understand that we all want the best for our children. It's just that
Yes.
sometimes we just don't know how to get to that. And sometimes we feel like it's easier if we do it not in the best positive way. And it is a work that is constant. That's why metacognition is important. Thinking about thinking and thinking with the intention of learning and improving. But it's an easy job once you understand that together is easier than alone.
Mhm. Yes. Teamwork does make the dream work, right?
Yeah.
It really does. Well, Principal Gonzalez, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your incredible wisdom with us, sharing your experiences from PS 94 and District 15. And I want to thank our listeners for joining us for this episode of Literacy Matters and Power Conversations. And if today's conversation has resonated with you, please share it with a colleague, a school leader, or a teacher who is committed to creating classrooms where every child belongs and every child can grow as a reader and a writer. Until next time, remember that literacy matters.